The wind clawed at the shutters as the last embers in the hearth sighed into ash. Eleanor sat by the window, her fingers tracing the faint etching Thomas had carved into the wood. "I'll come back for you. It was a promise made under a sky of smoke and sorrow, the kind that felt eternal until time wore it thin." Outside, the moors stretched empty, their silence broken only by the distant cry of crows. She had stopped counting the days. Only the seasons changed now. The war had ended long ago, yet her heart had not received the news. Each night she left the lantern burning in the window, as if its frail glow could guide him home. Tonight, however, the air felt heavier, charged, expectant. Somewhere beyond the fields, thunder murmured like a warning, and for the first time in years, she thought she heard footsteps on the road. The knock came just as the storm broke. 3 slow, deliberate strikes that made the walls shudder. Eleanor froze by the window, her heart lurching into her throat. No visitor had come this far in years. She moved toward the door, each step echoing against the hollow floors, her hand hovering over the latch. The storm roared outside, yet beneath it she could swear she heard breathing. Steady, patient, waiting. For a moment she thought it was his voice, whispering her name as he once did through the dark. She opened the door. A man stood drenched on the threshold, a soldier's coat clinging to him like a second skin, his face half hidden beneath the brim of his cap. The lantern's light caught his eyes. Familiar, almost too familiar. "I promised him I'd find you," he said softly. The wind rushed in behind him, scattering ashes and memory alike. He spoke her husband's name as though it carried weight. Eleanor led him in without a word, the warmth of the room swallowing the chill that clung to him. The stranger stood near the fire, steam rising from his coat as he removed his gloves. His eyes wandered the house as if it were a memory instead of a stranger's home. "You were expecting him?" he murmured. She said nothing, only poured tea with shaking hands. He told her they had served together, that Thomas had saved his life. Yet something in the way he said it felt rehearsed, too precise, as though the words belonged to someone else. When he handed her a folded letter sealed with mud and age, her breath faltered. The handwriting was unmistakable, and suddenly, the storm outside seemed to retreat into silence. Her hands refused to open the letter. She stared at it as if doing so might change what waited within. Daniel's gaze never left her. He spoke softly of the last night before the battle, of promises whispered under falling shells. Every word seemed carved from pain. When he said Thomas's name, she felt her throat tighten, not from grief, but recognition. There was something uncanny in his cadence, a rhythm that echoed her husband's voice. "He wanted you to know," Daniel said. He kept his promise until the end. A tear rolled down her cheek before she could stop it. The rain hammered harder against the windows, and somewhere, deep in the house, a door creaked open on its own. Night deepened until only the storm and the ticking clock dared speak. Eleanor sat by the fire. The letter finally opened in her trembling hands. Thomas's handwriting, fragile and precise, told her he had dreamed of her face in his final moments. Yet the words grew strange, halfway through. Inked darker, the tone colder, as if written by someone else. She glanced up at Daniel, who watched her too closely, too intently. "You were there?" she whispered. He nodded once. I held his hand. The flames dimmed, and for a fleeting instant, she saw another figure reflected in the window. Thomas, pale and still, standing behind Daniel. Then the image was gone, leaving only the echo of a promise that refused to die. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the house like a held breath. Morning crept over the moors, pale and uncertain, brushing the windows with gray light. Eleanor hadn't slept. Daniel had taken the guest room, though every creak of the old floorboards reminded her she wasn't alone. The letter lay open on the table. its words shifting each time she read them, as though written by two hands, one loving, one foreign. She thought she heard footsteps in the hallway again, slow, measured. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there, fully dressed, eyes sunken yet awake. "You were talking in your sleep," he murmured. "You said his name." Eleanor's breath caught. "And what did I say after that?" His silence was the kind that made her skin crawl. She busied herself with breakfast, though her hands trembled too much to steady the knife. Daniel sat at the table, watching the rain fade into sunlight. His presence filled the silence, heavy but not unkind. "He talked about you every day," Daniel said suddenly. "Said he couldn't die until he saw you again." Eleanor looked up, startled, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Then why didn't he come home?" she asked. Daniel's gaze hardened, the faintest crack in his composure. "Some promises," he whispered. "Follow us beyond dying." The words hung in the air like frost, and somewhere deep inside she began to wonder if the man across from her was haunted, or if he was the haunting. That afternoon, Daniel walked the moors, claiming he needed air. Eleanor watched him through the window, the wind tugging at his coat like invisible fingers. When he vanished into the fog, she turned back to the house and froze. The bedroom door, the one she hadn't opened in 5 years, stood ajar. Inside, the scent of tobacco and old paper filled the air. Thomas's uniform hung where she'd left it, but the dust was gone. The floorboards bore fresh footprints leading to the window. A single photograph had been moved. Thomas's portrait now turned to face the wall. Her heart thudded painfully. She whispered his name, and somewhere behind her, the floor creaked in reply. Daniel returned before dusk, his boots caked in mud, and his eyes distant, almost vacant. Eleanor confronted him at once, her voice trembling but fierce. "You went into his room," she accused. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I didn't," he said quietly. "But he might have." The way he said it made her blood run cold. "Hey," she whispered. "Thomas," he replied, barely audible. "He follows me sometimes, especially when I lie." The lamp between them flickered violently, shadows bending on the walls like unseen figures, gathering close. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying what sounded like a man's laughter across the fields. More that night, Eleanor dreamed of the trenches, though she'd never seen them. She saw Thomas crawling through smoke, whispering her name. Blood pooling beneath him. Daniel stood beside him, hand pressed to his chest, promising to bring her the message he never finished. When she awoke, her pillow was wet with tears, and the sound of a man weeping echoed from the hall. She rose, clutching her shawl, and stepped into the corridor. Daniel knelt by the window, his face in his hands, whispering words she couldn't make out. Then he lifted his head, and for a heartbeat, it wasn't Daniel's face she saw, but Thomas's, gaunt and grief-stricken, whispering, "You should have waited." Morning arrived like an intruder. Eleanor woke to find the house colder than before, as if the warmth had been siphoned away in the night. Daniel was gone again. No sound, no note. Only the faint trace of damp footprints leading toward the woods. She followed them until the mist thickened into a pale wall, the air tasting of rust and rain. There, by the edge of the stream, she saw him kneeling, whispering to something she couldn't see. His hands moved as if cradling another's face. When she called his name, he turned, startled, eyes glassy with grief. "I was talking to him," he said. "He's still here." His words trembled like leaves in the wind. And for the first time, Eleanor felt the chill of being the ghost in her own story. They returned to the house in silence. Daniel's boots left a trail of wet earth across the floor, but Eleanor didn't scold him. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the reflection she had seen. That night, as the wind sighed through the cracks, She found him sitting by the fire, staring into the flames as though they spoke. "When he died," Daniel said softly, "he asked me to tell you one thing, that he kept his promise." She frowned. "But he didn't come home." Daniel's eyes glistened. "He tried. I stopped him." The room seemed to contract, the air tightening around her chest. "You stopped him," she whispered. His hands shook as he reached for the poker, stirring the embers. "He begged me to. He didn't want you to see him like that." The confession clung to her like a fog she couldn't escape. Each corner of the house seemed to murmur now, every draft whispering his name. She began to see Thomas everywhere. The mirror, the window, the rippling surface of her tea. That evening she found Daniel asleep at the table, the letter clutched in his hand. But there was something new, scrawled across the bottom in trembling ink. "You shouldn't have told her." She recoiled, staring at Daniel's sleeping face. His lips were moving, muttering, answering someone unseen. The words chilled her blood. "I'm sorry, Thomas. I had to." And in that moment she knew the haunting wasn't bound to the house. It was bound to him. She tried to leave. She packed a small bag and stepped outside before dawn, but the road seemed different, longer, unfamiliar. The mist thickened until she couldn't see the path at her feet. From the distance came the sound of boots marching, dozens of them, growing louder, surrounding her. She turned back toward the cottage, heart pounding, only to find Daniel standing in the doorway, watching. "You can't go," he said softly. "He won't let you." Her voice broke as she shouted, "He's dead!" The wind died instantly, and Daniel's face changed, his expression softening into a sorrow she couldn't name. "Then why?" he whispered. "Do I still hear him?" That night, Daniel finally told her everything. How the trench collapsed, how Thomas was crushed beneath the mud but still breathing, how he had begged Daniel to end his suffering, to promise to deliver the letter and stay by her side until she no longer wept for him. He said, "Love could make ghosts." Daniel whispered, "I thought he meant memory, but now I know better." Eleanor's tears fell silently, each drop vanishing into her trembling hands. She looked into Daniel's face and saw both men at once, the living and the dead, merged by a secret neither could escape. "Then who are you now?" she asked. His reply came slowly, almost reverently. "Both of us, until you let one of us go." The next morning arrived, shrouded in fog and silence, as though the world itself refused to wake. Eleanor wandered the house in her nightgown, her bare feet brushing across cold floorboards that seemed to breathe beneath her. Daniel was at the window again, staring out toward the moors, his reflection trembling in the glass. "He doesn't rest," he murmured. "Not when you still wait." She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she had stopped waiting long ago. But her lips refused to move. The letter still sat on the table, though now the ink had bled into the paper, erasing the words entirely. Only one phrase remained, faint and defiant. "You promised." And as she whispered it aloud, a man's voice whispered it back from somewhere deep within the walls. By afternoon, the air in the cottage felt suffocating. Eleanor tore open the drawers and cupboards, as though searching for an answer hidden in wood and dust. Behind a stack of old photographs, she found a torn piece of paper, half of a message written in Thomas's hand. "If he returns, don't let him in." Her pulse thundered. She turned to Daniel, who stood silently in the doorway, watching her. "You knew," she said. "You've always known." His face darkened. "I tried to protect you," he replied, "but you called him back." She stumbled backward as the lamp flickered violently, shadows spinning across the walls. "Called who back?" she cried. Daniel's voice broke. "Me!" The house began to groan as if stirred awake by unseen hands. Every door creaked. Every board whispered. Daniel tried to steady her, but Eleanor pushed him away. "What are you?" she demanded, his expression fractured like a mask splitting at the seams. "Part of him," he whispered. "Part of me. When he died, something clung to me, his breath, his promise." She stepped closer, trembling. "Then what do you want from me?" His eyes filled with tears. "To be released." The wind burst through the window, scattering ashes through the air like snowfall, and for a fleeting moment she saw both men standing before her, two souls trapped in one broken vessel. That night, Eleanor locked herself in Thomas's old room. She needed proof. Something solid to separate love from madness. She tore through his belongings. Medals, letters, fragments of his voice in ink. Beneath the floorboard, she found a small tin box. Inside, a blood-stained dog tag and a photograph of Thomas and Daniel together, smiling. Scrawled across the back in Thomas's handwriting were the words, "He carries what I couldn't." As thunder cracked above the roof, she heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, dragging, uneven. The doorknob turned. "Eleanor," the voice said. Thomas's voice, low and trembling. "You promised to wait." She backed away, whispering, "You're not him." The door opened to reveal Daniel, or what was left of him. His eyes no longer his own, his voice trembling with another man's memory. "I came back," he said, stepping inside, his breath visible in the cold air. "You asked me to." Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, tears streaking her face. "You're not Thomas." He shook his head slowly. "Then, why do I remember your touch? The light flickered once, then died." The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow from the dog tag in her hand. A whisper brushed her ear, not from Daniel, but from the void behind him. "Don't believe him." And when lightning split the sky, Daniel's face was gone. Only Thomas's remained. The storm raged through the night, howling against the old stone walls like something alive. Eleanor barred the doors and sat by the dying fire, clutching the dog tag to her chest. Every window rattled, every flame flickered as if the house itself trembled in fear. From upstairs came a dragging sound, slow and deliberate. Boots scraping wood. She rose, her breath shallow. Each step up the staircase an echo of dread. At the landing, Daniel stood in the dark, his silhouette still, and waiting. "He's here," he said, his voice layered. "One voice too many." "He says you never stopped waiting," she whispered. "You're frightening me." His eyes gleamed with tears. "Then why did you keep the light burning?" Daniel's voice trembled as he stepped closer. "He wants you to forgive him," he said, "to let him go." Eleanor's hands tightened around the dog tag. "And what about you?" she asked. "Do you want release too?" For a moment Daniel smiled. "A broken, fragile thing. There's no me without him," he whispered. "He lives through me. His guilt, his love, his death." As he spoke, the temperature dropped, breath turning to mist. Behind him, the mirror cracked without a sound, splitting their reflections into three. Hers, his, and the one that should have stayed buried. "You can't keep both," Daniel said softly. "You must choose who remains." She fled into the night, the wind clawing at her gown as she stumbled through the moors. Lightning flashed, revealing the shape of the cottage behind her, its windows glowing faintly as if lit from within by unseen hands. She ran until the earth gave way beneath her, collapsing by the stream where she had first seen Daniel, whispering to the air. The dog tag slipped from her grasp, sinking into the mud. Then a hand, warm, trembling, rested on her shoulder. She turned. Daniel knelt beside her, tears streaking his face. "I tried to keep him away," he sobbed. "But you called him back with every prayer, every candle. Every night you whispered his name." And through the roar of the storm came another voice, faint, pleading. Don't listen to him." The storm broke in violent fury, wind tearing branches from trees, the river swelling until it roared like a wounded beast. Eleanor clutched Daniel's face, searching his eyes for the man she once knew, or the one she once loved. "If he's still in you," she cried, "then hear me, Thomas. You don't belong here." Daniel gasped, collapsing into her arms, his breath ragged. "He won't go," he choked. "He wants to come home." The air crackled, lightning split the sky, and for one unbearable second, Thomas's voice echoed from Daniel's throat, clear, desperate, human. "Eleanor, please, don't let me fade," she screamed, holding him as both voices wept through the same mouth, the living and the dead dissolving into one final storm. When dawn came, the storm had finally died. The world lay washed and still, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and loss. Eleanor awoke by the riverbank, Daniel's body beside her, lifeless yet peaceful. The dog tag lay in her palm, warm despite the morning chill. She whispered Thomas's name one last time, and for the first time in years, there was no reply, only silence, soft and complete. She buried the tag beneath the willow by the stream, pressing her hand into the soil as sunlight broke through the clouds. In that fragile light, she thought she saw them both, Thomas and Daniel, standing together in the mist, smiling faintly before fading into air. And for the first time, she wept not from waiting, but from letting go. Weeks passed before the villagers dared to climb the road to the Whitlock cottage. They found the windows shuttered, the lantern still burning in the window, its flame thin but alive. Eleanor lived quietly now, moving through her days like someone relearning how to exist. The house no longer groaned. It simply breathed in rhythm with her. She often sat by the stream where she had buried the dog tag, listening to the murmur of the water, as though it still carried voices beneath it. Sometimes she thought she heard laughter, soft and distant, the way Thomas once laughed when the world still had color. But when she turned, there was only wind and the gentle sound of her own heart remembering. One evening, as twilight bled across the moors, Eleanor heard a soft knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate strikes, the same rhythm that had once changed everything. Her blood ran cold. She rose, her breath trembling, the air in the room suddenly heavy. The fire flickered, the shadows deepened, but she opened the door anyway. No one stood there. Only the empty road stretched before her, and the wind carried the faint scent of tobacco, the kind Thomas used to smoke. She smiled sadly and whispered into the dusk, "I kept my promise too." Then she closed the door, locking it gently, the way one might close the final page of a story that had waited too long to end. As days folded into nights, Eleanor began writing again, letters never meant to be sent. Each one started the same. "To my loves, both living and gone." She wrote of the silence, of how it no longer frightened her, of how the echo of their voices had become a kind of comfort. Sometimes she left the pages on the windowsill, letting the wind carry them away. She didn't know where they went, or if anyone ever read them, but she liked to imagine Daniel and Thomas walking together somewhere far beyond the moors, reading her words aloud beneath a gentler sky. It made the silence feel full, not empty. Autumn came early that year. The moors turned gold and crimson, and the air smelled of wood smoke and rain. Eleanor tended the garden again, planting marigolds beside the path as Thomas once had. She spoke to the flowers as she worked, not expecting answers, but offering her voice to the stillness. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she found something glimmering among the roots, a tarnished button, military brass, worn smooth by time. She smiled faintly, brushed off the dirt, and pressed it to her heart. "I know," she whispered. "You're home." The wind rustled through the leaves like a sigh of agreement. That night, Eleanor lit the lantern, one final time and placed it by the window. Its glow spread through the glass, casting a golden path across the fields. "This isn't for waiting," she murmured, "but for remembering." She sat in her chair by the fire, eyes half closed, listening to the quiet heartbeat of the house. Somewhere beyond the walls, the sound of marching faded completely, replaced by the steady rhythm of the wind through the grass. As sleep overtook her, she dreamed of the moors bathed in dawn, of two figures walking toward the horizon hand in hand, and though her body remained, her heart followed them, into the peace that only love, finally released, can know. Years drifted past like gentle smoke curling from a forgotten fire. The Whitlock cottage stood unchanged at the edge of the moors, its stones softened by moss and time. Villagers spoke of the widow who lived there once, the woman who waited for a soldier that never came home, and the stranger who vanished with the storm. None knew the truth, only that on misty nights a single lantern still glowed in the window. Inside, dust lay thick on the floors, but the air felt tender, almost alive, as though memory itself had decided to stay. And if one listened closely between the creak of the beams and the hush of the wind, one might still hear her voice, soft, certain, saying he did come back. A traveler passing through the moors one autumn evening saw the lantern light and sought shelter. The door, though old, opened easily, as if expecting him. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and lavender. A cup sat on the table, half filled with tea long gone cold. On the mantel, beside a faded photograph, lay 2 dog tags entwined with a piece of ribbon. The traveler called out, but no one answered. As he turned to leave, he felt warmth brush his shoulder, like a hand, fleeting but gentle. When he looked back, the chair by the fire was rocking, slow and steady, as though someone had just risen to greet him. He left at dawn, unable to shake the feeling that the house had watched him go. When he reached the crest of the hill, he looked back and froze. The cottage stood quiet and still, yet in the window burned a golden light that shimmered against the fog. For an instant, 2 silhouettes appeared in the glow, a woman seated by the fire, a man standing beside her, his hand resting over hers. Then, as the wind rose, the light dimmed, and the figures dissolved into the mist. The traveler bowed his head, whispering a prayer for the souls that had never truly left each other. Seasons turned, and time washed gently over the story, like tide over stone. The Whitlock cottage became part of the land, its timbers sinking into soil rich with memory. Wildflowers grew where the garden once stood, their colors fierce against the wind. Children from the nearby village spoke of seeing a lantern light that moved through the fields on quiet nights, guiding lost travelers home. They said it was her, still keeping her promise, to wait, to guide, to love. And when they asked who the soldier was, the old ones smiled and said, "The one who came back twice." Long after, when even the cottage was gone, the legend remained. They called it the Lantern of the Moors, a light that appeared only for those lost between sorrow and hope. Some said it was love made visible. Others said it was the memory of a promise kept beyond death. But those who saw it swore it felt human, a warmth that asked for nothing, only to remind them that love, once born, never truly dies. And somewhere beyond the veil of fog and time, a woman's voice whispered through the wind, gentle and unafraid, "I waited, and he found me." The lantern flickered once more and went out, leaving only peace in its wake.